I am super excited for this episode of Sales Fiction. Jennifer Cunnington, who is the home loan sales manager at STCU, is going to be sharing her insights and experience around sales. Jennifer has been in sales and finance for 20 years, although you would never know that if you met her in person. She's just got such a bright, youthful spirit. She's an avid Peloton rider. She's making me want to get a Peloton. And she also is very involved in her community, serving on multiple boards. And I think we actually met at a fundraising event more than 5 years ago in the Tri-Cities. So she's out and about around town and has so much wisdom to share. Welcome to Sales Fiction, a podcast that helps small sales teams get big results. I'm your host, Christy Lawrence, the founder of Mighty Sales and a longtime sales professional who traded my corporate sales career to help small but mighty teams do more with less. Each week on this podcast, we separate sales fact from sales fiction so that you can hyper-focus your effort on the skills, strategies, and tools that will have the biggest impact on your bottom line. Let's dive right in. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Christy. Happy to be here.
And happy 2021.
I know. Happy New Year. We made it.
We did. So I always like to jump right in with talking about your first experience in sales. I think a lot of people kind of get into sales accidentally. They don't really think about maybe a career in sales. How did you get started in sales?
Well, that is a great question. I was working for a credit company at the time who was involved in leasing equipment, and they decided to take part in acquiring financial institutions that were going out of business. Well, when they did that, I was the only one with mortgage background. So we helped actually board their employees and board the big portfolio of assets that they had in mortgages. And I was the only one with that experience. So not even my management had that really. So I was able to step in and kind of help them through that process. But I was so young that I didn't really know what I was doing. And before I knew it, I was selling lots of different things and being involved in that. So that's how I really got into it. And that was a long time ago.
It's funny that you say that because I feel like so many of us got into sales by accident, just kind of like what you're talking about, right place, right time. And then all this time goes by and you're like, wow, okay, I guess I made a career out of sales. So you're not alone in that. Yeah. During your experience in sales, I feel like when it comes to sales, there's a lot of advice out there that, quite frankly, is kind of garbage. And there's a lot of really good advice out there. Since this podcast is about breaking down sales myths, I always like to ask people, what is the worst piece of sales advice that you've received over the 20 years you've been doing sales?
The worst piece of advice for me has probably been to rely on other people to take care of the big things. And so I didn't have that kind of trust factor. So I really wanted to learn as much as I could about a lot of things. So I would be able to help people in that way. So I didn't want to really rely on anybody to take care of, the main parts of a transaction or the education process for one of my clients. And so I just didn't want to leave it to somebody else.
So when you're trying that, then how do you balance taking care of the big things when you have ongoing transactions? Because this is a challenge for a lot of us in sales, is that we have the actual sales activity of the work, and then we have the delivery aspect of the work. How do you balance those two things?
Well, very carefully. I'm rethinking all the time how I do things because I'm so detailed. Because I've held so many positions in my industry, I know a little bit about an awful lot of things. And so I'm what you call sometimes as an anomaly, maybe. Because of that, I can be sometimes a detriment to the process, which isn't sustainable, because I really want to make sure that my clients have the best experience possible. So what I'm trying to do is learn how to delegate more, educate my staff, and especially my right-hand people as much as I can so that they know some more about what I do, so they can take over some of that monitoring process and connection process with our clients. And then I can step back and get back to the focus of the bigger things that I need to do. So yeah, it's an ongoing process.
It is a process. I have a client we're actually working a lot with right now on that handoff between sales and then client delivery. And we're always tweaking it because I think my experience is people think the sales process ends when the customer says yes or signs the dotted line. But in my opinion, you're still very actively involved in the sales process for the entire duration of that time that person's a customer, and making sure that they have a good experience throughout the entire transaction and afterwards is a part of the sales process. But you have to balance that with then generating new leads and finding new clients and serving those people as well.
Absolutely. And your database is really your best sales approach, because for those people who you've already done a wonderful job for, who you've loved on, they've loved on you, they only want to refer you. So it really helps you down the line from not having to constantly start new relationships because they already know you.
Absolutely. I'm always saying the best place to find new customers is from your previous customers, that you're not always having to start from scratch.
Absolutely.
So in your experience, what is the most overlooked aspect of sales?
I believe just that nurturing aspect, really putting yourself in their shoes. I think sometimes salespeople, especially in my facet of the industry, think that it's about just one transaction. It's just about, like you just mentioned, getting them to say yes, but really it's about the overall process. You know, you might be able to get them to say yes, but are they really understanding what they're saying yes to? So I've always really taken pride in educating my borrowers and getting them to the point where they feel absolutely comfortable and they understand what exactly they're signing up for and how it benefits them. So that, you know, when they get to the closing, they have minimal questions, if any at all. And then, like we just talked about too, you know, they can go out and refer you to their friends and family and colleagues because you've done such a great job for them. This is, you know, one of the biggest financial decisions that they have to make in their lives. And so we really want it to be one of the best ones they do as well.
You want them to leave with a good taste in their mouth, not just that, okay, that happened.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've been super successful in your career. You've managed a lot of teams. What do you think has contributed to your success? If you had to boil it down to one thing, what do you think that thing would be?
Yeah, I've had just such wonderful mentors. Some of my first bosses, if you will, have gone on to be extremely successful in large businesses. And one of my first bosses kind of put me in my place a little bit early on and said, hey, every time I went to him with a problem, I think we can all get caught up in the immediate issue at hand. But when I went to him with a problem, he would say, wait a second, I understand everybody has problems, but what's a potential solution? So I want you to go back, research something that might take care of that issue, how we could deal with it, how we could improve that situation overall. Come back to me and I'm going to help you implement it, or at least, you know, get people together who can. And so I think that has become a foundation for me, is not to get so wrapped up in one tiny piece of the puzzle, but really to look at how that piece of the puzzle will fit into that larger picture so that we can move forward.
Yeah. And I think what you're really speaking to is the reality that in sales, no matter what type of sales you do, fundamentally, you are a problem solver. Your job is to solve problems for people, whether it's the initial problem of getting what they want, or if it's a problem that happens during the process. And it sounds like for you that one of the key success factors is learning how to solve problems and then getting support and mentorship so you can continue to develop that skill. Am I encapsulating that correctly?
You are, absolutely. I mean, I think every day is a learning opportunity. There's not one person out there who knows everything. So even though we might call ourselves experts, there's always room for improvement and learning.
Absolutely. It is actually one of my pet peeves. I feel like professionally, for most of us, we feel like, well, I'm good at this and I've had success, so now I can stop learning. But if you look at people, whether it's an actor, an actress, or an opera singer, or an athlete, people at the highest levels continue to practice. They still go to rehearsal. They still hire their swing coach or their singing coach, that they continue to develop. And that, I think, what I'm taking away from this one thing is I'm going to start asking myself every week, what did I learn this week? And I think that's a good reflection question. Like, where am I still learning? Where am I still growing? And giving space to that.
I agree.
So when it comes to learning, I know you manage an awesome team at STCU. But if you think about kind of your team and just teams in general for success, and you think about 2021, if you could coach your team on one thing to help them be successful in the new year, what would that be?
Well, I think that there are several factors, but one of the biggest things we always talk about, and it's not even cliche, it's know your why. It's why are you doing this job? What joy do you get out of it? What do you seek to bring to other people? Is this a long-term position where you can grow? Because in most cases, that's exactly what it is. But you have to know why you're here. It's not just money, because if it's money, people make bad decisions and not so good things result. But if it's helping people, if you do great things will come. And so again, I always ask, why are you interested in this? What really attracted you to this role? Because it's not easy. If it were so easy, everybody would be doing it. So, really to get back, especially this time of year, at the beginning of the year where we're business planning, is what do we want to accomplish? Why are we here? So that would be one of my biggest questions.
And it's such an important one. And it's easy to lose sight of that, you're busy, you're trying to keep everyone happy, you're trying to hit your goals. And I think that especially when things get hard, sales is a career where you have to have a lot of resilience. That is fundamental. And understanding your why and having a reason for doing what you're doing, I think leads into resilience as well.
Yep.
So when you're hiring team members, this question comes up a lot for people. Like, do you hire people with experience? Do you hire people without experience and train them? Are there specific qualities that you're looking for? So I'm curious, from your perspective, you have such an amazing team. When you're hiring team members, what are you looking for?
Well, you mentioned it. Knowledge and aptitude is at the top of the list. We live in an ever-changing environment, and being kind of on your toes, and you don't have to know everything because that's impossible, but to know a really good foundation about the role and how it works, that's a big thing. But I look for engagement. Can you be committed? This role comes with a lot of flexibility. And so we really need somebody who can manage their time well and be engaged when they need to be. It doesn't mean that you have to work like crazy from, 9 to 9. Some people do that. Sometimes I've done that. But really, this role is so unique that we can have flexibility, but we have to use it the right way. And so being in kind of receiving mode for clues and little things that might come up. So again, we're getting back to problem solving. That's another trait I look for. That's really important too. And finally, commitment to what you're doing. A lot of people think, gosh, I can do this and maybe something else. That doesn't always work either. And so committing to being that helpful, knowledgeable, service-oriented person to provide that benefit to your client, that's all we can ask for. Again, you don't need to be a total expert because that's impossible, but just really being engaged in the role is huge.
Absolutely. I love that you were talking about commitment, because that's actually my word for 2021. So I'm like thinking about commitment all the time. What does it really mean? How do I demonstrate it? What do I want to be committed to? That's my next question I have to ask myself, because I can't be committed to everything, right?
Everything, too many things.
Absolutely. So you also talked a lot about looking for engagement. And I think that is so important when we talk about team members and teams. And it can be hard in sales, right? I feel like sales is that Sisyphean task where it's like, okay, you had this goal, you hit it. Now you start from scratch again. That it's right, this kind of churn that you're in where you're always having to push, always having to challenge yourself, always having to grow. How do you help your team in that? How do you help keep your team engaged and motivated?
Well, first of all, sales training. Nobody wants to listen to just one person all the time. And so I think to gain different perspectives and learn different ways of doing things, I think a good sales trainer is imperative. We talk about goal setting, learning how to prospect and going through different exercises, really kind of getting some of that fear-based emotion out of what we do every day. As you mentioned, we're kind of starting from scratch every month, but are we really?
Yeah.
Sometimes salespeople are very half empty. So getting to the point where you might not be half full, but you're maybe right in the middle so that you don't get back into the, bottom half of the glass where you're so fearful. And again, then you start to make some bad decisions or make mistakes. And so sales training, also connecting with staff, finding out what are you going through this month? What resources do you need? What are your challenges that you're having? What can we help with? We're lucky to work for a pretty progressive organization that is constantly asking about what new things or new resources can we bring aboard. And so the result of that will be wonderful, like new technology and things to come this year to hopefully make our jobs easier. But the reality is we have limitless potential, and sometimes that can scare people. And so helping people also kind of compartmentalize their goals into achievable chunks, that is super important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of research that shows that long-term goals are actually less motivating over time than shorter-term goals that can be broken down and achievable into those chunks. So I love that you said that about chunking it down. And of course, I love that you said sales training, because that is near and dear to my heart and something that I 100% believe in. And I think that that's where people get stuck. It's like, even if you're the best person in the world in sales, you can still learn new ways to do things. And it's always great to hear other people's approaches on how they're doing it. And it helps things from getting stagnant.
It absolutely does. There's always a better way to do something.
Yeah. I had a boss who told me once too, where I was in sales and I was like, I just feel like I'm saying the same thing all the time. They're like, it's because you are. But your customers aren't hearing it as much. You're going to get tired of it and bored with it way before your customers are. And I think that was such a good reminder for me that just because something feels stagnant, it's a good opportunity for me to refresh. Is this still the right message? Is it still adding value? What can I be bringing in that's new? But also not to lose sight of the fact that I'm saying it a lot more times a day than my customers are hearing it.
For sure. For sure.
Absolutely. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and wisdom. I could talk to you all day, but I want to ask you before we go, if there was one other thing that you want to share with people in terms of your experience with sales, something that would set people up for success, maybe something we haven't covered, but you feel like is really important when it comes to sales or leading a sales team, what would that be?
I would say learn how to assimilate, meaning put yourself in your client's shoes, and that will help you understand what you need to know, how you can build confidence in your craft, and how to deliver the message, as you were just talking about, better. So really, it's just, really being committed again and engaged in what you're doing. We live in this ever-changing climate, and so it's great to have that foundation, but, just so we can be able to have these very meaningful conversations with people and discuss their goals and needs. Once you set your sights on that and help them through that, that's really when you're going to gain success.
And I love that you said that about putting yourself in your client's shoes. I think oftentimes it's easy. I even find myself doing it when I'm working with clients. I'm thinking about my world and then I'm using jargon and I forget, oh, maybe we haven't actually talked about this yet. Maybe I need to take a step back. Or I have a client in one industry that has, specific questions that they ask. And I'm like, I don't think as a consumer, I actually know what the answer to that question is. You think people know because you're doing it all the time. But think about if this is the first time you're buying a house or the second time even, but you've only done it twice. And the last time you did it was 10 years ago. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Know your audience. And that's why, the first time you talk to somebody, to let them talk. I think salespeople make the mistake of trying to sell somebody on something, right? 30 seconds out of the shoot, when really our role is a consultative one. And so being able to just say, okay, well, what are your goals? What are you looking to do? Long term, how might this benefit you? And that's when we can use our knowledge and expertise to help them.
Absolutely. If you are not asking questions, you are not selling, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, and meaningful questions too, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much, Jennifer. I always just love talking to you and hearing your wisdom. And I really appreciate you being on here. And for you guys listening, if you are looking for a home mortgage and you are in Washington or Oregon, where else are you guys, Jennifer?
We're in Idaho as well, and Montana.
Idaho and Montana, very exciting. STCU is such a phenomenal company with phenomenal people, so I can't recommend them enough either. So make sure to check them out if you are in the market for a home mortgage or refinance. They do fantastic, fantastic work. Thank you again, Jennifer, for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Christy. It's been a blast.
One of the things that you heard Jennifer talk about in this episode was investing in your team, and particularly through sales training. If that piques your interest, you will not want to miss our episode next week. Next week, I'm going to share the 3 key things your sales training needs in order to be effective. And if you are responsible for developing your team, coaching your team, getting your team excited and motivated on a regular basis, this episode is for you. You're going to leave with some key things that you can implement to help make sure that you are supporting your team in an actionable way. In the meantime, if you liked this episode, make sure to give it a 5-star review and subscribe to Sales Fiction so you can get fresh episodes downloaded as soon as they're available.